Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this sort of a jester style hat. You don't need to put these in. You can make these for boys or for girls, for adults, for children, for babies. If you do it for a baby, you might need to put a little strap on, a little piece of ribbon to keep it on their head. This is like a teenage sort of adult size. I'll show you how to make the pattern for it. And then I'll show you how to sew it up to make it into this little jester type fun hat. I'll show you how to make some little tassels as well. I'm not brilliant at them, but you can still make tassels. If you can't do tassels, you can sew some pom-poms on to the point of your little jester hat. So I'm going to show you how to do this. The pattern that I use for this, what you'll need is one of these. Do you remember when we done the hexagon cardigan? So I'm going to show you how to make a hexagon shape. You make it so that when it's folded, that this part will go over your head. So as you're working it, what to do is get a measuring tape and measure around either your head if it's for you or a child's head. And then what you'll do is you'll keep working your rows until one side is half the measurement around your head. So if that's your head, you'll measure around your head. I'll hold that there. Measure around your head, and let's just pretend this is 23. We'll go to 24. So half of 24 is 12. So you'll do your square from corner to here to 12. So when it's sewn together, it'll be 24, if you know what I mean. Hold it together, measure around it, and it should be the same measurement as your head, nice and snug. And I'm going to show you how to do this first. It might be a little easier if you get yourself some stitch markers. You're going to need 6 just to mark out the corners, just if you're a beginner, just so that you don't get lost. So we're going to do a magic circle. I'll put the tail end of the yarn in my hand and wrap the yarn around. Just wrap it and cross it over. Put your hook under that one and pull your working yarn through. Then do one chain. You can do a chain of 4 and then join it into a little circle and work into there. Now we're going to do this granny stitch, and the granny stitch is 3 UK treble crochets, and if you're in the USA, these are 3 double crochets for you in each set of granny stitch. So from now on I'm going to call it a granny stitch, and you'll use 3 of either UK treble crochet or USA double crochets. So my first one is going to be my chain of 3. So I've got a stitch there, one more and one. That makes 3. Now that's my first stitch for my first cluster of granny stitch. So yarn over and go into your magic circle and do another one. That's 2 and one more is 3, and that makes up your granny stitch. Now what you're going to do is you're going to chain 2. We need 6 of these clusters with chain 2s in between. So chain 1 and 2 and go in there again and do a granny stitch, and that is 3 of your UK treble crochets or 3 USA double crochets and one more, and that completes that granny stitch. So we're going to chain 2, 1, 2. So we need 6 of these clusters. And 3. That's my third cluster done. I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. Now if you're a beginner, what you can do is put a stitch marker through those chains of 2 so that on the next round you're not going to get lost. and you know where your corners are going to be. These are all going to be corners. These are going to be the corners of the 6 points. So I've done a chain of 2 and I'm going to do one more granny cluster. 1, 2 and 3 and chain 2, 1, 2. I'm going to put a marker in that one. We should end up with 6 markers and 6 chains of 2. So I'll do my next cluster. 1, 2 and 3. I'll put a marker in that one. Once you get this bigger, you won't need the markers. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need one more. I need 6 clusters and 6 chains. So chain 2 and put my last cluster in. 1, 2 and 3. Chain 2. I'll put my marker in that one there. Now I'm going to pull the tail end of my magic circle and pull it in tight. And that's why I like the magic circle. It pulls it in really tight. Now I've got my last chain of 2 here. And I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that first chain of 3 that we did and pull through. Now I would put a marker in there. So you've got 6, because we've got 6 points to this. This hexagon's got 6 points. I'm going to take that one back out just now. So I'm going to do the next round. I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to turn my work around. So that's my first stitch of my cluster. Now into these chains, you're going to put a granny cluster, 2 chains and another granny cluster. So that's the first stitch of my cluster. 1. So into that chain space, that's 2 and 3. So that's my first granny cluster done. Chain 2 and into that chain space again, put another cluster. 1, 2 and 3. So I'll put my pin back in there. If you're a beginner, put the pins in. If you're not, you don't need to put the pins in. What I'm going to do is I'm going over to this one here. I'll take my pin out and I'm going to do the same. 1 granny cluster, 2 chain and 1 granny cluster. In that chain, we're making these points. So 1, 2, into that chain space, and 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and into that chain space again for my second cluster. And 3. So I'll put my pin back into that chain of 2 just to keep it marked, and then we'll take this one out. We're going to the next chain. We'll put 1 granny cluster, 2 chain and 1 granny cluster. Move over to the next chain space and do the same all the way around. So you should still have 6 points, and each one of them has a granny cluster, 2 chain and 1 granny cluster. Do the last cluster in this chain here. So one granny cluster, 1, 2, that's 3 stitches. Chain 2, 1, 2, and back into there for the second part of that granny cluster. 1, 2, and 3. Now you can put back your markers if you want. You can put your markers back in to mark the spaces. Now into the chain of 3, I'm going to slip stitch in, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to turn my work around. Turn your work around, and I'm going to work into this chain space. So now we're going to work into the 2 chain spaces for your corners, and we're going to go into this single space in between. So into this space, that's my stitch, that's stitch 1. So into that space I'm going to put 2 more, 1 and 2, and that's that granny cluster done. So I'm going into the corner. Now you can, if you're a beginner, keep using your little markers in these corners so you don't get mixed up with them. Into this chain space. So that's put my first granny cluster in, 1, 2 and 3. Chain 2, 1, 2, and do my other one. So this is my point. I'm not going to call them my corners anymore. I'm going to call them the point. So that's the point done, and I'll put a pin in just to mark it, just so you can see. Now into the space next to it, I'm going to do 1 granny cluster, no chains, just 1 granny cluster. Pull my yarn up. Now I'm using green yarn just so that you can see it better with that background. So I'm going back to my next point. So that's your next point there. And we're going to do another point. So 1 granny cluster, 2 chain, and 1 granny cluster. So 1 cluster, 2 chain, and 1 cluster into the same chain space. Now to get this to go into shape, you've got to have 6 points. 5 points don't work. You've got to have 6. So we've got a space here in between. That's my next point there. So I'm going to put 1 granny cluster in there. Just the same way you do when you make a granny blanket. 1 into there. So I'm going to, this is my next point. It's got my chain of 2. So you know your points because I've got chains of 2. So do my cluster, 1, no chains, just a cluster, and I'm at my last point. So we'll build the new point. That's 1 cluster, 2 chain, and 1 cluster. Chain 2 and put my next cluster in the same space. Now we're going over. This is the cluster we started with. So in the chain of 3, just slip stitch into that chain of 3. And that one gets in that chain. And this is what you've got. You've got your 6 pointed star almost. I'll tuck that end under there a little bit neater. So you've got your 6 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now you'll notice my next row we're going to have 2 spaces in between the points. So we'll put a cluster in that space and a cluster in that space, and then we'll build the next point, and that's 1 cluster, 2 chain and 1 cluster. That's what you'll do in the points. In between in these spaces you'll just put 1 cluster, no chains, just 1 cluster in each space. So you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, turn your work around, and we're going into the space. So that's my first stitch of the cluster. Into the space, that's 2 and 3. The reasoning I'm turning my work, it's easier to get to the space rather than slip stitching along to that one, and you'll end up with a little line there that's very, very visible. But if you do a chain 3 and turn, you can get straight in to the space. So I'm at a point. I'm going to take this out, just drop it down there, and I'm going to build a new point. So 1 cluster, 2 chain, 1, 2, and 1 more cluster in that space. Now if you're a beginner, you can put your marker back in so you don't get confused between your chain space and this space. So you can put your marker back in. Now we've got 2 spaces before we get to the next point. So we're going to put a cluster in here, no chains, just go straight in and put your cluster of 3, and then across to the next space. Two and 3. So I'm at my next point. So I'll take my marker out. I'm going to build a new point. 1 cluster, 2 chain and 1 cluster. Chain 2 and 1 more cluster. And put my marker back in. Now I'm going to do that all the way around. So it doesn't matter which way you turn it around, it's the same. It's got your 6 points on it. So what you'll do with your next round is chain 3 and turn your work, and you'll work into the space and work your way around. And your next round, chain 3, turn your work and work into the space. It's a lot easier to work into the space that's here than to work your way across the top into the space over here. So I've done my 6 pointed hexagon. I've got the centerpiece, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 rounds will fit an adult, a teenager to an adult. If you need it bigger, then put another few rounds on it. If you want it smaller for a child, just do less. And the way you fold this is, if you saw my video on how to turn this hexagon into a cardigan or a jacket, you've got 2 points up here, and you take the next 2 and you fold them, and it makes this L shape, which in turn makes a sleeve and half of a body. And you'll have another one of these, you'll make 2, and then it'll turn it into, if you sew the back and the front, you'll have a sweater. If you just sew the back, leave the front open, you'll have a cardigan like this. I'll show you this. This is the little cardigan. These are the same hexagons. As you can see, I'll unbutton it. That's where I've joined them, and that 1/2 of this is on my channel already. So what you'll do is, you'll have one, where's the point with the thread so I can sew it? I've got put 1 point up to the top, and you've got your next 2 points. Fold it in half and let this corner meet that corner, so you have this shape. Now this part is the part for your head, and that is just those fun little points that when we turn it in the right way, we'll put our pom-poms on. So what we're going to do now, I'll show you that again. You've got 1 point at the top, put 1 point to the top, and take your next 2 and just fold it in half, and then turn it. Just let those 2 corners join together, and those 2 corners. So you've got this little shape. I'm going to put my needle on. I don't need all that thread. I don't need all that yarn. We'll need another piece of yarn to sew down this side. Now if you want a rim on your hat, once you've sewn it, you can go around and around and put a rib on. But when I measured this was big enough to sit on my head. And like I said at the beginning, you'll just get your measuring tape. If you're doing it for a child, get your measuring tape and measure it around their head or your own head and see what size you need. And then when you put it down, you'll have one half of it there and the other half there. So put your tape around your head to see how wide you need it all the way. So if you need 22 inches, then you'll need this to be 11 inches, and 11 on the other side will make 22. So you're going through the 2 parts of that stitch and through the next stitch across from it. Just pick up both parts, and we're going to sew down this side. That stitch and that. Your stitches should match up with each other because we've got the same amount of stitches down one side, and you're going to stitch down to the corner. So you'll sew all the way down the side to this corner, and then you'll get another piece and you'll stitch from up here all the way down. So you'll sew down both sides of your hat. So I've sewed up the side. I'm going to keep that so that I can either sew pom-poms or tassels on. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it in the right way around. And that's you got your funky little hat. Now you can, if you want, put a band around here and then fold it, but it does fit on the head like that. You can make it smaller if you want. Now I'll show you how to make a tassel. I'm going to use my phone and get my yarn, and I'm going to wrap it around the edge of my phone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. That should be enough. Now cut that there. We need to make 2 of these tassels. I've got a sharper pair of scissors. I'm going to take this off and cut through the bottom. So I'm going to take my needle with the yarn on it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this this end of my yarn through, and I'm going to tie it. Pull it down slightly to the side. Just pull it down a little bit. Tighten it. And then we're going to wrap around and make a tassel. Just wrap around, tight, tight. Then use your needle and stitch right through your tassel. I'm going to go back in there and bring it out there. Nice and tight. I'm going to tie this up. Nice and tight, so your threads don't come loose. Tie it really secure. Cut this end off. And I'm going to thread through these loops. Just thread through the loops. Now you can use a pair of scissors and neaten up your end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the top of my little hat. Just go through the top of your little hat. You can leave it dangling and then go through these loops. Go through the loops. You can leave it at a little dangle and go through your hat again. I'm going to wind it just a couple of times so it's got a little bit of dangle on it. Go through the loops and then come through the stitches. Come through that bit and down into there, just to hold it. Make sure you do it nice and secure. I'm going to trim that off, and you've got your little dangly tassel. Now I've got another pair of scissors here, and I'm going to trim my tassel all to the same size. Trim my little tassel, trim those edges. And there you go, you've got your other little tassel. Just make sure it's on securely. Make sure you make it really nice and secure. And that is your fun little hat done. Now you can just fold the ends down when it's on your head. They'll fall down anyway, and you can put it on your child, an adult. Make it, this is more an adult size, or you can make it smaller for a child. A beautiful little fun hat. Look at that. And that's your hat done. You just need to fold down your ends. It'll fall down when it's on your head. Your head will be up here, and these will fall down anyway. This is like a little jester hat. Use up your scrap yarn. Do it any colour that you like, and I'm sure you're going to absolutely think this is so adorable, this lovely little jester hat. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and please click on the bell icon, and YouTube will tell you when I put up another tutorial. So have fun making some hats, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.